So NHL 16 is back, Brian Weedi. We had some discussions a few months ago where there was some legitimate concern whether the NHL franchise was going to do well enough in its relaunch on the next generation consoles for it to come back. It's back. It's bigger than it was last year. We're assuming it's better than it was last year. The features list has come out already much earlier than it has in many years. I believe that features list has come out this early because EA wants to get in front of it. It appears to me and appears to many people that Electronic Arts has realized the way that they communicated with their fans last year about NHL 15, that communication coming very late, right before the game was released, and not being completely forthright with everything until the last minute as far as what was in the game and what was out of the game. So this year, there's a lot more new features. There's a lot of features that have been brought back. There's some new things as well. So Brian Weedi, looking over this the list of feature sets and modes for NHL 16, do you believe it will be enough to get back people that were longtime NHL fans that did not wind up getting NHL 15 last year?
Some, yeah, but no matter what they did, they weren't going to be able to get everybody back. I mean, that's going to take years of good, solid releases with good word of mouth. We talked about this in the past, and that's once you lose people, they start to realize they don't need what you've been giving them, and they move on and find something else. So, and in addition to that, I mean, this is a different situation from just being a poor game. It was, like you alluded to there, it was people felt deceived, and they were really irritated at how they were communicated with and treated with. And that's different from just being disappointed in a game. So no matter what they did this year, they weren't going to get everybody back. Maybe they'll get back 25% of those people, 30% of those people, something in that range. Sales will go up, but maybe not to the levels they would have been had they released a fully complete NHL 15 and treated the community the way that they should have been. Now, that being said, they're bringing back the features that initially lost people. So EA Sports Hockey League is the big one. That's the most popular mode in the game, and they're bringing that back. So it's going to bring back a lot of those people who were who had to abandon the game because they didn't have it, and that was the only mode they would play. And there's other features they're bringing back again to attract those people back. Doesn't mean they're going to get everyone back, but it's a start. So they're doing what they have to do right now, and it reminded me of what NBA Live 15 was to NBA Live 14, which was, okay, here's the game you should have had last year. Now, there's a big difference there because NHL has the gameplay in place already, and NBA is still searching for that. But they've got this opportunity now to reestablish themselves and then really try to grow in future years, because this year is just about recovery, and that's the way it looks when I read through the features set, and that's the way it seems in the manner in which they're rolling out the first features early in advance of E3, where they'll certainly have more to talk about.
The thing that strikes me is that they really do seem serious about this, and it sounds silly to say it out loud. But, as I mentioned, we discussed at length last year, we all have enjoyed the NHL series for years. And when I say we, not just you and I, but all of the folks that we work with on the Press Row podcast, for example. The NHL series for years has been one of my favorites, and some years my absolute favorite. And it's encouraging to me that so much of the way that so many of the modes that people enjoy playing are getting represented. It's encouraging that the information is being released much earlier, so that there's not that wait and see right up to the last minute to know what's in the game. I mean, we all know that making these games, especially for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, I mean, it takes 10 times more effort now to make the game than it did on the PlayStation 3, and which was 25 times more than it did on the PS2. Like, even these simpler games demand so much more. And the only thing to me, I think that stands out as disappointing is the fact that online leagues remain null and void. And I completely understand it. Ultimate Team drives the bus. That's how these games make their money. EA Sports Hockey League was a absolute must have. I mean, to recapture a significant number of your core that played EA SHL, that had to be there. Online team play, cool. That's fine. Regular online play. The franchise mode, which is be a GM, which looks like it's going to have some additional stuff to it as well as be a pro. I mean, they're expanding these things out. So it's heartening that this game is going to be a big time NHL game. The lack of online leagues, sure, but I understand it. That's just not where the audience is. I've argued many times the reason the audience isn't there is because they made it far too complicated.
Yeah.
And that's probably a conversation for another day. But, as our friend Owen Good said, I'm not going to heap praise on them for technically doing what they should have done. But I am going to say I'm glad that NHL 16 is shaping up the way that it is because I love the NHL. I love the real NHL. I love the NHL series. I love playing my friends. I mean, it is so fun to play 2 or 3 games in an hour with your buddies online in NHL. Like, you can crank out these games quickly. It's so much great history. I'm glad that all appearances are this game is going to be well invested, well built, and I'm confident, I feel confident that this is going to be a game that we're not going to be disappointed in. Now, I could be wrong when it comes out, but I'm glad that the game is shaping up as a big-time game. So I'm back. I know that. Again, Brian, I may be in the minority on this, but I'm glad, and I'm back on board the NHL train.
And we all would have thought that NHL was going to be great at this time last year too, especially
That's
coming
right.
out of E3 and everybody was praising it.
Yep.
And that was because they were still hiding the truth about the game. But yeah, I've been watching some of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and as I watch it, I'm like, man, the atmosphere is great, the commentary is great. Yep. Let's make sure that gets enhanced more, which they do have listed there, and they have playoff beer, which is cool. So all that stuff is attractive to me. But there are also like things you see the bad habits bleeding back in. I mean, for all we're talking about them being open about this game, they refuse to answer the question of, will you have player editing in the game? Because the answer is obviously no, and they don't want to admit that for some reason.
Well,
yeah.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. Let me ask you this. Maybe the answer is no, or maybe the answer is maybe, right? And let me ask you this question, right? Because they're still a couple of months away usually from being finished with the game. Mm-hmm. And as we found out after the game shipped last year, online team play was supposed to be in the NHL 15 that shipped, but they didn't have enough time. So maybe the answer is we want it to be, but we're not sure, which is why they're not answering. And again, I'm not defending because what I would say, right, and I'm not a marketing, VP or anything like that. But if it were me, I would say we're working on it. We'll know for sure in a couple of months. But that's clearly not the tact that they're taking.
Yeah. I mean, there are different directions you can go with that. You can say, hey, our feature set is not completely locked down yet. We're still working on other features, and we'll get back to you on it. Or you could say, any manner you want to leave it open-ended if you want, but ignoring it while answering softball questions just makes people suspicious. And So they've ignored the player editing thing, except that they then chose a question, and these are user-submitted questions that had to do with, can you edit players in GM mode, which was answer no. And so they chose that one and said no, but then they won't answer the actual, can you edit players anywhere else in the game? So, I mean, could it still be possible? Sure. Then they should, if they really want to be open about this stuff, and tell people the truth and say, hey, we haven't come to a determination on that yet. That's better than just leaving people to assume it's not going to be there because you're ignoring them. Again, this is the kind of stuff they came up with last year, came up against it, and it was ignoring what they thought would be perceived poorly and then leaving people to discover that on themselves, which is much worse in the long run.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. But that's a risk that you take by coming out in the middle of May when your game doesn't ship until September, telling everybody what the big modes are, right? I mean, it's almost damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? I mean, people want to know when they can what they're getting at. To me, it almost feels too early, right? I'm actually surprised that they came out this early with all this information.
I agree with you on that, and it would be all right if all they had done was put out, here's our big features, because not necessarily, some of this stuff is much more minor or affects far fewer people, at least, than the central modes of the game. But then they went a step further and created this thing where submit your questions and we'll answer them, because we're all out in front and we're showing you how much we care about you consumers, and we want to gain back your trust. When you go to that length of trying to be open, you can't then just pick and choose, I think, and that's the issue that they come across now.
It's hard. You know what I mean? It's easy to sit here and cast aspersions. It's hard to put this together. I think they're learning. We're all learning. Every year this stuff changes. I mean, the way that you market games in 2015 is much different than you did in 2013 or 2011 or 2009. So everybody's learning, and it's interesting. And while we may not agree with everything that they've done, at least what we do know seems like it's going to be a much more full experience for anybody who is going to pick up NHL 16 this fall. So that's good.
The only problem is last year it wasn't what we did know, but what we didn't know.
That's
and
true.
The stuff you don't know, you don't find out until the last minute.
That is true.